Chairman.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this North West Area Planning Committee meeting today, Wednesday, the 18th of November 2020. My name is Maddie Thompson and I'm the chairman of this committee. I hope you'll forgive me looking sideways. I'm actually reading off my prompt on a separate screen. The meeting is held under new regulations which came into effect on the 4th of April in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are just a few housekeeping issues to run through. First of all, could I please ask everyone present in this meeting to ensure your microphone remains muted and your video feed off when not addressing the committee. This will reduce background noises and avoid any unintentional disturbances. The meeting will be hosted remotely via conferencing software. This allows members of the public to attend virtually and whilst being able to protect themselves and others and to observe the government's lockdown measures. We're streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item, please use the chat function of the meeting to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Members are reminded that apart from indicating you wish to speak or that you have to leave the meeting, the chat function should not be used for any other purpose, including questions. When speaking and referring to the agenda papers, please ensure you reference a page or paragraph number and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. When invited to speak, please ensure you turn on your microphone and your video if possible. Now may I ask officers taking part in the meeting to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Lee.
Good evening, Chairman. I'm Matthew Lee, Lead Specialist Place and Chief Plan Officer at Morton District Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Good evening, Chairman, members. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm the Lead Specialist Development Management. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bowles.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Bowles. I'm a specialist in development management.
Thank you. And Ms. Fuller?
Good evening, members. My name's Katie Fuller and I'm clerk to this afternoon's committee.
Thank you. Are there any other officers present who are taking part in the meeting as distinct from supporting it outside? Okay. Katie, could we have a roll call of members to confirm who is in attendance?
Yes, Chairman. Members, I'll call your name in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate if you are present, starting with Councillor Durham.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Fleming.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Evening, Katie. Yes, present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
Good evening, Katie. Good evening, everybody. Yes, I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Good evening, everyone. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Good evening, Katie. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
Good evening, Katie, and everyone present.
Councillor Miss White.
I haven't seen her. I think we better note her apologies and hope she's able to come back later. I know because she works, she has difficulty making it home for some of these meetings at 6.
Sure, thank you. Ask any other members in attendance if they could introduce themselves, please.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome. In attendance.
Councillor Morris. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Good evening, Katie. Good evening, members. Councillor Penny Channer in attendance.
Good evening, Councillor Channer.
Thank you. So item 2 is apologies for absence. May I have those, please, Katie? And could we include Councillor Miss White just in case?
All we have is Councillor Miss White.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 3 is the minutes of the 21st of October. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on 21st of October this year, found on pages 7 to 10, are approved and as a true and accurate record. I so move. If you wish to second that motion, please indicate.
Happy to, Chairman, and agree.
Thank you, Councillor Durham. Try again. Does anyone have any matters of accuracy to raise? If not, can we agree them by assent?
Agreed.
Agreed.
If anyone dissents, could you let us know quickly? That's lovely. I'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much. So next is the declarations of interest. I have to read this part. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they're also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should the needs arise throughout the meeting. If any member has an interest to declare, please use the chat function now to indicate, and I will invite you to speak. Councillor Durham.
Thank you, Chairman. You read that very fast. Anyone would think you're trying to get the meeting over quickly. I have a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council, who are statutory consultees on items pertaining to these applications. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Keys, I noticed.
Good evening, Chairman. I know the applicant of the 9. I've got the number here, which ends in 00910 full. Like many other times I've spoken, I have done haulage for them in a previous job, and I went through young farmers with the applicants, but many years ago now, unfortunately, because I'm not as young as I used to be. Thank you.
So that would be, just to clarify, that would be non-pecuniary, Councillor.
Yes, sorry, I didn't say that. Yeah, non-pecuniary interest. Yeah.
Sorry, I noticed that. Very sorry. Okay, I think that's completed that part.
Chair, sorry.
Sorry, yes.
And then it's all right, Councillor Fleming.
Sorry.
I need to.
Oh dear,
I know the applicant. I know the applicant well, so I won't actually be voting on that application. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Will you be remaining in the meeting, just so we're all clear on that?
Sorry, I lost you then. My connection.
Will you be remaining in the meeting?
I'll remain, but I won't comment and I won't vote.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. Right, now I think we are done. So we're moving on to item 5, the planning applications. We have just the one, land adjacent to Little Totham Hall, Church Lane, Little Totham. Okay, could we have the presentation, please? Ms. Bowles.
Thank you, Chair. So planning permission is sought for the demolition of an existing agricultural building and the construction of an outbuilding for use as an annex for dependent relatives. Here we have the block plan. You can see the access here from Church Lane. This here is the building which is proposed to be demolished, and this is the main dwelling on site. Block plan, you can see the proposed building, and again the main dwelling on site. We have the floor and elevation plans of the existing building proposed to be demolished, and the proposed elevation plans of the annex, and the proposed floor plan.
You're actually quite faint, Hannah. Is anyone else having trouble, or is it just me?
No, sounds fine to me, Chairman.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
A bit louder. No, that's fine. We've got some site photographs as well. Here's the existing building proposed to be demolished, and the main dwelling in the background. The application is a resubmission of a previously refused scheme. The proposed scheme is identical to that previously refused, and therefore the previous reason for refusal has not been overcome. The proposed attached annex is contrary to criterion 1, 2 and 5 as set out within the Specialist Needs Housing SPD, and it is not considered to form ancillary accommodation. The scale of the building, distance from the main dwelling and level of accommodation is considered to result in a self-contained unit of accommodation without a degree of dependency on the main dwelling. It is not considered that there would be a functional link between the proposed residential unit and the main dwelling. The inherent domestication, intrusion and intensification of an unjustified residential unit at the site is considered to harm the character and appearance of the site and result in the erosion of the rural character of the countryside. It's not considered that the slight amendment to the applicant's supporting statement has overcome the conflict with the development plan highlighted by the council when refusing the previous identical planning application. Therefore, the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just confirm we've no speakers on this, public speakers? Okay. Right, I'm going to move the recommendation and I'm going to ask someone to second it. Now, just for clarity for anyone who's listening, just because you've proposed or seconded a motion does not oblige you to vote for it. It is a matter of form in order to have a proposal on the table to debate. So would someone second, please? Councillor Durham.
Chairman, I'm happy to, if it's a procedural matter, that's fine, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, members, I do have Councillor Key's hand up to speak, but Councillor Siddle called it in, so I'll go to him first unless he'd rather wait. Councillor Siddle.
No, I'm quite happy to talk first.
No,
Chairman.
I'm happy with Richard to speak first.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay,
Councillor Keys.
Right, Councillor Siddle, off you go.
Yeah, I understand this application has been before the council previously, but it wasn't called into this committee at that particular time. In terms of the application, it is one of those ones that you can see good reasons for it being refused, and also I believe there are good reasons for perhaps that it should be approved. It's not a new building, it is an existing building, and the existing building is of a dilapidated nature. Now, in terms of the occupation of that building, I know it's not a material consideration, but it would be used for family members in terms of that situation. And it does meet, I understand what Ms. Bowles said about it doesn't meet all of the criteria in terms of being an annex, but it does meet quite a lot of the criteria in terms of being an annex. The issue obviously is it's not next to the main dwelling. In terms of it being an intensification, I would question that one because it is an existing building and it's hidden by a very large barn from the listed church, which is the closest building to it. So you can't actually see this building from the church, and the main building that you can see from the church is a horrendous building. It's a large agricultural building. So I can't see it being an intensification. Yeah, to me, this is something where I think it would enhance the site because the applicant is repairing a dilapidated building. So yeah, in terms of the balance, there is a mixture of balance in terms of this application. I think it would in terms of D1, it would enhance the design and quality of the area. So therefore that would be a positive in terms of this particular building. I think what the applicant is trying to do, and the reason why it is such a large, and it is a large annex, is they are trying to reuse an existing building. So hence why it ends up being quite a large building. And at this stage, that's all I've got to say.
Thank you. The next hand I have up is Councillor Durham, and Councillor Keys, you've taken yours away, so you're going to wait a minute still.
Thank you, Chair.
I still want to speak. I've just taken it down. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, well, if you leave it up, I'll get to you after.
Sorry. Yeah, if I could just clarify with officers, Councillor Siddle just made some extremely good points, but he did say that the scale of it was due to the size of the existing building, but I thought this was to demolish the existing building. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. Yeah, yes, they are proposing to demolish the building and rebuild it.
So its existing size is actually irrelevant. Okay, could you also tell me how many meters it is from the host dwelling?
Through you, Chair, it's around 28 metres.
Okay.
From the principal elevation.
Well, Chairman, it would be very hypocritical of me not to raise the fact that this is contrary to the LDP. It would establish a really very difficult precedent for us. To go against the LDP, but also to draw a line in the sand about the distance that the annex is to its host building. I think that we're on, very thin ice there, and that's the reason that it was previously rejected by this authority. We have won an appeal in the last few days, upholding on the basis that it's contrary to the LDP, and absolutely we need to follow that, otherwise we're going to be putting future appeal decisions in jeopardy. But yeah, I do see positive sides to it, but I think the policy is enough to uphold the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have a comment from you, Mr. Lee, on that? Are you ready to do that? Would you like to do that?
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm having some technological issues. I was clicking and it didn't appear to be registering.
As long as you can hear us. Okay.
Yep, I can hear. I think to some extent, obviously, Councillor Dumm's made a couple of points that are quite correct. I think there's multi-layered level of issues. Obviously, Councillor Siddle has, broached the point of the policy, but I'd go back to a little bit before that, where Councillor Siddle highlights the fact that the current building is a certain level of degradation and poor quality. Currently, the building is now a cultural building. It's an accepted fact by everybody, that all buildings, particularly maybe some that aren't built for as long permanency, have a certain lifetime. And just always highlight members' attention to this matter, that a building only has a life period, and just because a building is appearing tired and maybe slightly to the detriment of the character area, we shouldn't just embrace allowing almost anything to replace it, because once granted permission, we have to look at the lifetime of this new development. So just because an existing, we have this put forward a lot by agents as well, so obviously be conscious of this, if not just this application but for all applications, that just because, especially in our culture building, is coming to the end of its life, doesn't mean we should automatically allow a new form of development, whether it's a house, whether it's a commercial building or whatever. But obviously just need to be conscious that just because one building is coming to the end of its life doesn't mean planning permission should automatically be granted for a new development. Notwithstanding this, Councillor Siddle highlights the SPD and the various points within it, and it's fact that this does meet a number of the policy requirements, and I think Ms Bowles' report in section 5.1 covers this very well. As I said, a number of the points it does meet. Officers are concerned by the distance from the dwelling. For it to be an annex, there needs to be an ancillary nature. It's not that it's a primary residence that just happens to be in the curtilage, because that would actually form a separate planning unit. And if that was to remain for more than 4 years or 10 years if we impose a condition, that would become a breach planning trial that was unable to be defended at appeal. So just because someone says they want to use an annex, if they don't use it as an annex, we have to think about that. And we do get challenged on this through law development certificates and enforcement breaches quite a lot, and arguments about what is ancillary and what isn't. So that is something, 28 metres, you need to be able to look at how would that ancillary nature happen. Would there be a daily relationship? Would meals be taken in the main dwelling? Would there be shared recreational space? All things like that, which officers think at 28 metres it's unlikely that would be, it's unlikely that would happen, which is further exacerbated though by 2 points. One being the level of residential accommodation. Obviously, if it was just a bedroom with an ensuite, obviously it's much more likely that meals and everything else will incur in the main dwelling. More residential space, there is less likely that's to occur. And thirdly, which is a slightly unusual point, but is highlighted in the officer's report at section 5.1.7, the future occupiers annex live in fairly close proximity to this property already, and there hasn't been any explanation how or why this needs to be an annex, or how this would change the relationship actually of the current situation of just two separate planning units, two different dwellings. I understand that, you know, things change and material considerations and relationships alter, but the applicant hasn't explained or put forward any argument to why this would have now have an ancillary relationship, and what would be different between the current situation, which is two totally different residential units, which would mean that if this was to carry on going forward, would just be instantly a breach of planning control. And obviously, if we were to impose a condition that doesn't meet the 6 tests, its ultra virus would fall away. So, which obviously is a concern that officers always raise. And as Councillor Durham said, I'm not quite sure of the argument that just because a building is currently this size, if it's being demolished and replaced, why a future building needs to be of the exact same size. But hopefully, I think I've covered the points for you, Chairman. If not, please clarify and I'll happily.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. We might be back, but I have Councillor Keys followed by Councillor Jarvis. So Councillor Keys first, please.
Oh, good evening. Thank you. Excuse me. Judge, every application on the merits in front of you. Now, yeah, old agricultural building. We're here again, another planning application on another old redundant barn. It's not fit for purpose in today's life, the way that farming is carried on. And Matt has now, he's already spoken about it, but I thought we had to judge on what is in front of us. But the applicants do live across the other side of the churchyard. And I remember back when the farm cottages at the front, there was 2 cottages knocked down to build the one crofter. So they automatically gave up one residential development. And this in the farmyard is just across the drive from the farmhouse. And yes, I believe 28 metres, a meal would not be cold the time it walked across there. So I do think it is definitely there to be looked after. The building will never be sold away from the farm because it's right in the middle of the farmyard. So to knock it down, use the same space as there. It's right next door to an agricultural barn. It's not worth hardly anything to the outside person to buy because it's next to an agricultural barn, and it never ever come up because it's in the middle of a farmyard. Now, judge it on the merit that's in front of it. I think I'd go against the officers. I know Matt Lee's now going to be ranting and raving, but that's what I'm been led to believe, and we should judge them on their independent. And I think I would put a proposal that this should be passed.
Right. Well, we have a proposal on the table. We have a proposal on the table, so we'll doubtless come back to that should we need to. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Chair. I spotted the demolition point as well. I think that's being clarified. Obviously, we have to judge the application in front of us. It would seem, if the current building is being demolished, that obviously a smaller property, smaller annex could be built in its place instead of perhaps the larger one which is proposed. But nevertheless, obviously, that's what they've proposed, and that's the application we're looking at this evening. I don't have a problem with the distance. I'm not sure if there are sort of rules on the distance. It probably depends, as I think, as Councillor Keys says, this is in a sort of farmyard setting. 28 metres isn't a large distance if you're talking about buildings and outbuildings. I've got outbuildings that are much further away, 3 times further away. I think so. I'm not so worried about the distance at all. I think it's. Is it possible to? Could I ask if through you, Chairman, could I ask Officer Lee to comment on whether this concern about it only being used as an annex and obviously not having its own dining facilities, kitchen, that sort of thing. It's being put forward as an annex. So I assume they've looked into the rules and that's what they intend to use it for. And it may well be that the family circumstances are, as it's a family, that they're very happy to use it as an annex, just somewhere to sleep. And obviously the family come and all eat in the main house. I mean, as an annex, is it possible, if there's a concern that it might be 2 properties, to impose a condition and say, well, it must be used as an annex? You can't have a kitchen in it, a dining room, and all the rest of it. I mean, couldn't that just be a condition? I don't understand. Is that something perhaps
I understood
Matt could help me with?
fall away as not being reasonable, but I'm going to come back to Mr. Lee. But one of the points is we have to look for the lifetime of the development, which is 50 or 100 years away, and we won't be talking about the same families. Well, might be the same family, but it won't be the same family members. But let me ask Mr. Lee to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. To a certain extent, yeah, you've covered the point. There is the issue of whether or not a condition can be imposed. There's no issue per se with the amount of residential accommodation in the purest sense. There's nothing that says you can't have all the facilities available for day-to-day living. It's quite acceptable to have that, but that's one of the balancing factors in coming to whether or not a proposal is acceptable. Obviously, if something was a 5-bedroom, it'd be very difficult to argue it's an annex. But the first point of consideration is if it's to be an annex, it has to be ancillary. So one obviously is the factors is the ability to actually function as an independent dwelling. But as I said, just because you do doesn't mean that just because it does have those facilities doesn't mean it should be refused automatically. One of the others is the likelihood and its relationship with the main dwelling. And so that's where, for example, our old our old policy, which fell away, part of the local plan review, actually required that it was an attached to the main dwelling and integral. Personally, I thought that was too over the top, for want of a better phrase, and I'm quite happy that that has fallen away, because I don't necessarily agree with that as a principle. But it just does allow officers and members and decision maker to take a more pragmatic and reasonable approach. I acknowledge what you're saying, Councillor Jarvis, about 28 metres isn't far for an outbuilding, and I don't disagree with that. But what you've got to look at is 28 metres too far for you to be proactively likely to walk there to get your cup of coffee in the morning in the rain? Would it be unlikely for you to think, I'll go and watch the TV with the family in the rain, at the dark, at night, at unattractive hours? It's about the ability to have an ancillary relationship rather than a incidental relationship, or an independent relationship. Just because there is interaction at some level doesn't mean it's ancillary. And I think your point about an outbuilding is very different to an annex per se, where you go to your garage once a day or something. If you don't have to do, you won't, or you're forced to. It's a balancing exercise. There is a big difference. That's all I would advise.
You come across as a bit lazy there, Officer Lee. It's not always raining. It's not always dark. I regularly go much further than that for a cup of tea, I can assure you. But thank you for your comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Jarvis, just for completeness, would you... Thank you.
Apologies, Chairman. Yes, just looking for the button.
I'm noticing we're getting some comments in the chat, which I would be grateful if people would stop, not least because members of the public can't see it. So I think we have time to move to a vote. I did put the proposal of the recommendation to refuse. So, Katie, could you take the vote, please, on the recommendation to refuse?
Yes, Chairman. So we are voting to refuse the application as per the officer's recommendation. Members, I'll take your name in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate whether you are for, against or abstain? Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
For the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
I'm against.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm also against.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Thompson.
For the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. That is 2 for, 4 against and no abstentions.
Thank you. So that fails. Could I please have a proposal? Was that Councillor Keys who was going to put the proposal, but as well as the proposal, which I guess what it's going to be, because it's going to be to approve, but we need reasons for approval, and I'll be needing to check with Mr. Lee that they satisfy the legal requirements. Okay, Councillor Keys. I think.
Hello, can you hear me? Oh, well, I'll forward it to be approved. And D1, there was already a building there, and I don't think it's detriment to the area or the village scene or whatever they said there. I can't remember what the terminology was, to the rural location. That's it. It's not detrimental to the rural location. I'll leave Mr. Siddle. Has Councillor Siddle got anything else she looks at? I haven't got my rule book in front of me at the moment. Sorry.
I need a seconder, so I
will second that.
Cheers, Richard. Thank you. I haven't got the book in front of me. Sorry.
Are you content with that reason for refusal? Would you like to add anything and see if Councillor Keys will adopt your extras?
So I would suggest that that the design and quality of the new building will enhance the environment, and the fact that we are reusing an existing site, and that it does meet most of the criteria of being a annex for the main property.
I'll second all that. Thank you.
You just proposed. As long as you're happy to adopt Councillor Siddle's suggestions into your original proposal.
I'm more than happy to.
He's already seconded, and since they're his ideas, I'm sure he's going to carry on seconding it. Mr. Lee, does that satisfy our legal obligations?
Obviously, as always, it's within the gift of the decision maker. All I would highlight that I've got a couple of concerns in the fact that you've implied that any building that's detrimental can be replaced automatically, and the bigger problem I would flag is that you've acknowledged the application does not meet requirements of the policy, but you're saying that to a certain extent that doesn't matter, and doesn't appear to be any things that outweigh the harm. Therefore, this would be a very dangerous decision for any future applications on annexes, because they would just be able to quote back this decision to say that actually an annex does not need to meet all of our policy requirements to be acceptable. So I'll just be very conscious of the wording that's used. Thank you, Chairman.
So,
thank you.
So Mr. Lee, or Ms. Bowles, is it possible to use some of that policy in terms of passing this application? Surely when we're passing an application, it doesn't always meet every single element of criteria.
Thank you, Chairman. I would say in most instances officers will be saying it does, and if it doesn't, we clearly explain in our officers' report why there isn't harm. So let's say it needed to provide 100 metres squared and it's providing 98 garden. In the officer's report, it would clearly state that a 2 metre shortfall is not considered to be so onerous or injurious to warrant a reason for refusal. So, but obviously what I would say is that Councillor Jarvis is, in his opinion, I know obviously he wasn't the person that recommended or wasn't put forward the motion, but his stance was that actually it was policy compliant in relation to the SPD, which is a subjective matter, and obviously each application must be determined on its own merit. But I would never encourage members on any policy to say it hasn't met some of the criteria, but we aren't worried about that, for want of a better phrase, because that just is something that can be used against us time and again. So please never say that, members.
Mr. Lee, you did say today that planning is half subjective and half rule. So that subjective distance. So if we say that it is compliant in terms of that it is in proximity of the main building.
Yeah, and as I said, Councillor Jarvis, sorry to start with Councillor Siddle, but just to back up that obviously Councillor Jarvis, when he was talking, sorry Chairman, yes. I apologise. It's much harder than when it's at committee in the formal setting. I apologise.
Yes.
But yeah, as I was saying, obviously, each application is determined on its own merit, as I think if it was Councillor Keys was saying, due to the location, it's unlikely that it would be subdivided. There may well be a much closer relationship. So there have been points discussed tonight around that point, but it's just not that it was acceptable in this instance, not that it wasn't meeting the policies, which is obviously slightly different to what Councillor Siddle put forward. So that's all I would just highlight to members.
Okay, if I could come back, please, Chairman.
Yes,
I think I would look less on it if they'd put in an application to build a new building nearer to the house. They are using a building that was already there. I know they're knocking it down, but I would be less favourable if they were putting a brand new place up much closer to the house, I think. But on this, they're using a building. Okay, that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Right, I've got Councillor Durham, who I think might be about to offer something helpful.
Well, I'm trying, yeah. Can we say something like that?
I can hardly hear you, Mark.
Well,
Yeah, you're a bit.
Microphone off then, Mr. Keys. Thank you. That's better. Yeah, I think, how about something aligned with, due to the location of this building within the main site, it's more acceptable than if it was on the boundary, which would mean it's more easily divided up. Due to the nature of the fact that it's in the middle of a farm site, that's a reason for it being acceptable and contrary to policy. Mr. Lee, I'm sure you can make something from that. You know where I'm coming from.
Yeah, through you, Chairman. Obviously, Councillor Durham's obviously just put forward some positive aspects of the development, which members may consider that overcome some conflict with the policy. Obviously, it's within their gift, obviously, so that is a lot more balanced. So we're not saying that it hasn't met it, and that's fine. What we're saying is that although there may have been some conflict, there were benefits that outweighed the harm. So it's with
I've got you.
But just say, due to the location of the proposed building within the site as a whole.
Right. Okay. Now we've had a lot of debate about what the proposal is, and funnily enough, our training on chairing is that we don't do that if we can help it. Nevertheless, it's not the officer's job, and in fact, we can't even ask them to come up with reasons for refusal when they've just recommended, reason for approval when they've just recommended we don't. So can I, from perhaps Councillor Keys or Councillor Siddle, have the actual wording of your reasons for approval, because we've got to make this as simple as possible.
Okay, so my reasons for approval are due to the nature and the proximity and site layout of the property. It does meet the criteria for being an annex to the main dwelling.
Yeah, I think that's good. That works.
Right. Yeah. Councillor Keys, you all right with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I don't think there's anything else. It's using being built on the same footprint. So yeah.
Okay. Those two things then. Are you all right with? Have you got that, Katie? It's all got a bit. I know it's a bit confusing.
Yes, I've got that. Thank you.
As long as you're clear, that's absolutely fine. So we now have a proposal to approve for the. I'm not going to try and read it out. For the reasons as laid out by Councillor Siddle, who seconded Councillor Keys' proposal. Could we have a vote on that, please? Oh, Councillor Durham, you've got your hand up. Is that a legacy hand? It's a legacy hand.
It certainly was, and or I'm called, I will abstain on that motion. Thank you.
Okay. Because you were first, weren't you? So can we carry on with the roll call, having had an abstention from Councillor Durham?
Yep. So yes. Members, I will take your names in alphabetical order. Please could you indicate whether you are for, against or abstain? Starting with Councillor Durham, please.
Sorry, I jumped the gun, Miss Fuller. So, but I will abstain, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. I'm for that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keys.
I'm for.
Thank you. Councillor Morley.
Yeah, for the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Siddle.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Thompson.
I'm against.
Thank you. That is 4 for, 2 against, and no abstentions.
Right. It's slightly, well, more than slightly remiss of me. What we didn't do was look at the conditions. Can I have your agreement, everyone, on standard conditions and delegate the rest to the officers? that work for you, Mr. Lee?
Yep, that works for me. Thank you.
Yeah, and if we can ensure that any design is within keeping and the materials used are matching the existing.
Yes, and could we have those come back for the ward members as well as me for approval? Please?
Yeah, that's just what I was going to say. Yeah, back to ward members, please.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, right, that's lovely. That is that.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. Could we just go back to Katie and just make sure we recorded that vote correctly? I thought Councillor Durham abstained, but
you did.
Yes, I did.
When
Apologies.
Katie's,
Yes.
Okay. When Katie summed up the numbers, I'm not sure we.
Okay.
Thank you. Could you just repeat the numbers, Katie, for us?
Yeah, it is 4 for, 1 against, and 1 abstention. Thank you.
That sounds right. Okay, thank you. That's all agreed, and it's approved in line with discussions. I'm not going to try and spell it out. Agenda item 6 is any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent, and there are none. So item 7, the closure of the meeting. Members, thank you for your contributions this evening. Thank you to the officers for their support. I now draw the meeting to a close at 18:41.